Hi, I'm Jane Fullam. I've been a CASA for 15 years. I think I might have been drawn to the CASA program because I heard it had something to do with court, and I was kind of interested, always kind of a lover of court drama. So that's sort of how I made my way towards CASA. I convinced my husband to become a CASA with me. He was concerned that it was going to interfere with his golf game, but he did go along with it, which was a great thing. We were assigned actually a case together, and it was a pretty significant case involving 4 children. The little girl in the case had made a suicidal gesture when she was taken from her family and placed in a foster home. That led the foster mother to contact the authorities, and this little girl was placed in a county far from Forsyth County, which is where we're from, and she was placed in the state mental hospital. We went to visit her. She had no visits from her family because she was so far away from where they were living, and they didn't have the means to visit anyway. As a CASA, we have access to all of the information around a child, whether that information comes from the school, the counselors, psychiatrists, doctors, anything that has to do with a child, we have access to. And it was a really good thing in this case because we were invited to a meeting after the child came back into the county and actually wound up in the hospital. We were invited to a meeting, so were all of the attorneys invited to the same meeting. However, because attorneys have more than one case at a time, none of them showed up, but my husband and I did. And we found out all about HIV/AIDS, how it's transmitted, and what can happen if you don't take proper medication. This little girl was determined to have AIDS, which is beyond HIV, actually. And she was refusing to take her medication. At that meeting, as I said, we learned all about how AIDS is transmitted and where it was from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We were kind of bucking DFAC's attorney at the time, who was insisting that the child not return home to her mother. But the doctors had told us that if this child did not return to her mother, we could prepare for a funeral. It was a very interesting thing for my husband and I to go through because the judge took our word for what was happening with this child. The judge understood that we had access to all of this information and that we were speaking in the child's best interest. So that child actually did go home to her mother and has lived a good life since then. In my 15 years as a CASA, I've seen so many things. I've advocated for 34 children overall. I've seen many children adopted, many gone to family members, and many, as I said, adopted, as well as many reunited with their parents. I've learned how to change my mind about things. I can be very closed-minded. There was a recent case that I had in which the dad was quite volatile quite violent, had suffered from alcohol addiction, and his child was in a very good foster home, a home that I loved, a home in which the child was getting plenty of love and affection. And I really wanted that child to stay in that foster home, to actually become adopted by that foster family. But I had to change my mind about the dad, who followed everything that he was told to follow. He went into rehab. He was in rehab over a year. Before he left rehab, he took a job. He stayed in that job. He's been promoted through that job a couple of times. He got his own apartment. I visited him while he was visiting with his child. He was preparing lunch in the most loving manner. And he just did everything that the judge and the court asked him to do. And I had to change my mind and say, this guy deserves his baby. And he has become a really good dad. At the end of the close of the case, the judge asked him if he had anything to say, and he said, I do want to say thank you. And he thanked DFACS, he thanked the court, he thanked CASA for changing him into the person he now is today. So I would recommend becoming a CASA. It will consume you. That's not a bad thing. I kind of think I want to be all used up before I die. And I think it's a great way to be used up.